the true origins of the Bermuda Triangle.
The final transmission says everything looks strange, even the ocean.
The mysterious death of a mob legend.
If you think about it, who at that moment wasn't man in the sky?
And a horde of terrifying monsters that stalk the night.
They saw these shapes in the woods starting to move towards them.
But first, an alien encounter above the nation's capital.
They saw a huge fiery orange sphere, and then they would just zip off.
Amazing mysteries, bizarre phenomena, and chilling secrets. I'm Don Wildman. Join me on a journey beyond the unknown. July 19th, 1952, Washington, D.C. An air traffic controller is monitoring flights in and out of Washington National Airport when he spots something unusual. 7 blips on his radar screen, streaking directly towards the city. The controller is mystified. There are no flights scheduled to the area, and these objects are behaving unlike any known aircraft.
These radar blips started going at 100 to 130 miles an hour, kind of slow, and then they would just zip off at unbelievable speeds.
In fact, they're reportedly clocked at over 7,000 miles per hour. Then they vanish. The stunned operator contacts officials at nearby Andrews Air Force Base, who tell him that they too had witnessed something strange in the skies.
They said that they saw a huge fiery orange sphere.
Then, the following weekend, a pilot aboard a commercial flight into Washington faces his own spine-chilling incident.
He reported seeing a light that was following him. And then the light zoomed off.
When this stunning report reaches the Air Force, they scramble 2 F-94 Starfire jets and authorize them to shoot down any strange aircraft.
The flight leader is sent toward one set of blips.
But when he reaches the area, the skies are clear.
He reports that he sees no lights, and he never does.
But the second pilot, Lieutenant William Patterson, has a much more harrowing experience.
He sees the lights, and then that lights actually come around him. They surrounded him.
Lieutenant Patterson acts decisively and chases after them. But as he pushes his jet to maximum speed, the bizarre object suddenly disappears. The next day, the stunning event makes headlines across the country.
The story of unidentified flying objects over the Capitol and Air Force jets trying to chase them pushed any other stories off the front page. It was the story in the U.S.
In the wake of these strange sightings, some speculate that the bizarre flying objects could be alien spacecraft.
The public was disturbed and upset, so the Air Force understood that no comment was not going to work.
Facing mounting public pressure, the Air Force holds a history-making press conference at the Pentagon. Air Force authorities explain that the lights were likely caused by a rather common phenomenon known as temperature inversion. This atmospheric condition causes a layer of warm air to cover a layer of cool air. The resulting air can be so thick it reflects light and radar waves.
The radar beams bounce, so objects that are on the ground might appear to be 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 feet in the air.
While this explanation seems to calm the jittery nerves of the press, some find the theory of temperature inversion lacking.
Just about every day that month in July, there were temperature inversions in the area of Washington, D.C., and yet these lights and the blips were reported only on these nights.
Even the radar operators at National Airport question the explanation.
The radar operators were all pretty adamant about the blips that they were seeing, based on their experience, were coming off of solid objects.
In the following months, still more questions are raised when the staff at Andrews Air Force Base provides a new explanation of what they witnessed.
The folks that were in the tower at Andrews that had reported this fiery ball changed their story, and they said that it was a star.
With the Air Force giving unsatisfying and conflicting explanations, people question if the United States government is willfully withholding the truth. in order to maintain calm among the public. While the truth may never be known, some still point to the events in Washington, D.C. as evidence that we have been visited by beings from another world. Mysterious beasts lurking in the woods.
They had really enlarged, bulbous heads. People in the area called them melon heads.
Are they men or monsters? It's the 1980s, Fairfield, Connecticut. According to legend, a group of high school girls is out for a drive when they decide to explore the nearby woods. Suddenly, they spot something in the distance.
They saw these shapes in the woods starting to move towards them.
The bizarre figures appear to be unlike anything they've seen before.
It looked like they were small, maybe 3 or 4 feet high. They had really enlarged, bulbous heads, very disproportionate with their bodies.
The girls flee in terror. Back in town, they tell others of the incident. But it seems they're not the first to encounter these odd creatures. In fact, stories of bulbous-headed beings have been around for decades.
Some people said they lived out in the woods, out in abandoned farmland. Some stories say they will eat you. Other stories say they might abduct you if you encounter them.
Despite the varied accounts, the odd beings all share a distinctive feature and are soon given a name.
Because of these disproportionately sized heads, people in the area called them melon heads.
So who are these mysterious beings? And where did they come from? Some believe their existence can be traced to the 1600s. At the time, Connecticut's Puritan community is swept up in a wave of hysteria over witches. According to this theory, a local family had been banished to the woods for witchcraft. At first, everyone assumed they had died, but that might not have been the case.
Some people said that the family survived and their children inbred with each other, and that inbreeding created the physical and possibly mental mutations, which in many cases enlarged their heads.
So could these strange beings really be the descendants of witches? Over time, a more scientific explanation emerges. A rare medical condition called hydrocephalus.
Children are born with this ailment. They have fluids in their brain and in their skull, and it creates a large bulbous head.
Some have argued that stories of bulbous-headed creatures could have originated from people seeing children with this condition, and that over time, the stories spun out of control, creating the legend of the melonheads.
Someone may have seen someone with hydrocephalus and not understood the condition and made up a story about them.
Today, there's a range of treatment available for those afflicted with hydrocephalus. And the legend is now simply another tall tale that science put to rest. A murderous cannibal loose in the Wild West.
They wrestled for the axe, but it didn't stop him.
What terrible truth lurks in the dark shadows of the Rockies? In the high deserts of Grand Junction, Colorado, is a rustic institution that boasts one of the finest firearms collections in the nation. This is the Museum of the West.
We have Kid Curry's pistol. We have a Native American rifle. We have Annie Oakley's pistols.
But curator David Bailey believes the weapon most laden with intrigue also has the most obscure origins. What part did this weapon play in a gruesome death match between two desperate men? April 1874, Colorado. An exhausted man stumbles out of the woods and into a mess hall near the town of Gunnison.
When he emerged from the forest, he was haggard, kind of disoriented. His name was Alfred Packer.
Locals approach the stranger and question him. He says that 2 months earlier, he was leading a group of gold prospectors into the remote mountains when suddenly a snowstorm set in. With heavy snow blocking their path, the prospectors were forced to take shelter in a ravine. Trapped for weeks, their provisions ran out.
They were starving to death.
Packer explains that he left the group in search of help, but to no avail. And when he returned to the camp, he was met with a grisly sight that would change his life forever. All of his fellow prospectors were dead, except for one, a man named Shannon Bell.
He saw Bell hunched over a fire cooking something in a little tin cup.
And according to Packer, Bell was eating the flesh of the dead prospectors. Realizing he'd been caught devouring his companions, Bell sprung into action.
Bell jumped up with a hatchet, ran at Packer, and Packer had a small pistol and shot Bell, but it didn't stop him.
The gun was lost in the shuffle.
They wrestled for the axe. Packer got the axe and hit him and killed him.
Packer insists it was an act of self-defense, but those who hear his tale become suspicious. At the scene of the crime, they find all 5 men dead of hatchet wounds. And that's not all. One pivotal piece of evidence is missing.
They didn't find the gun.
They immediately wonder, is this man telling the truth? Did he kill Bell in self-defense? Or did he actually kill all 5 men to save himself from starvation? Locals conclude that Packer did murder his party. He is arrested and put on trial to face a second fight for his life.
Packer said at his trial that the only man that he did kill was Bell.
But his protests fall on deaf ears. He is convicted and sentenced to 40 years in prison.
People thought, we've got the cannibal, life can go on again.
When Packer dies in 1907 at the age of 65, it seems his legacy as the Colorado cannibal is set to live on in infamy. That is, until one fateful day almost a century later, when a new piece of evidence surfaces that will break the case wide open. It's 1874. 5 gold prospectors have been found hacked to death in the Colorado wilderness. The convicted killer, a man named Alfred Packer. But Packer maintains his innocence until the day he dies. So, was he guilty? Or is the real killer still out there?
Packer always maintained that he surprised the real killer, fellow prospector Shannon Bell, eating his murdered prey, and that he only shot Bell to defend himself. But because no gun was found at the scene, no one believed him. Then, in 1994, Museum of the West curator David Bailey stumbles upon an odd artifact found in the Colorado wilderness in 1950.
I was doing an inventory of the collection, and one of the firearms had a little 3x5 index card that said, this was found at the Packer murder site.
Could this be the missing gun Packer claimed he used to defend himself against a murderous cannibal?
If I could prove that this was Packer's gun, then I'd have a crucial piece of evidence in the case.
As Bailey inspects the gun, he immediately finds a clue. Until his dying day, Packer maintained that he shot Bell twice, and the gun in the collection has exactly 2 empty chambers. As Bailey digs deeper into the case, he finds another lead. Because of the long-standing interest in the Packer story, the skeletal remains of Shannon Bell had been stored at a local historical society.
So I thought, what if we could test that forensic evidence and see if there is a piece of a bullet?
Bailey takes samples of Bell's skeleton to the high-tech microscopy lab at Colorado Mesa University. There, they inspect the decomposed remains inch by inch. And finally, they find what they've been looking for.
They found a fragment of the bullet.
This bullet residue proves that Bell had indeed been shot. The team compares the bullet residue from Bell's corpse with one of the bullets still lodged in the museum's pistol. And the results are staggering.
The lead in the gun and the lead on their body was the same.
Not only had Bell been shot, but the bullets in his body came from the gun found at the scene.
Our best evidence showed that Packer was telling the truth.
Bailey believes this evidence is enough to cast considerable doubt on Packer's conviction, 94 years after his death.
Today, at the Museum of the West in Grand Junction, Colorado, Packer's gun sits among the firearms collection, a symbol of one man's brutal struggle for survival and redemption. A stunning clue as to the origins of Bigfoot.
Looks like a human upper molar, but it's way too big.
Is this proof that the Sasquatch really exists?
Felton, California. Nestled in the heart of a spectacular redwood forest, this small town boasts a museum dedicated to the region's most famous alleged inhabitant, Bigfoot. From Omaha to Sasquatch, descriptions from sightings across the country all detail the same figure, a 6 to 10 foot tall Neanderthal-like ape man with brown or reddish hair and, as the nickname implies, enormously large feet. Yet to date, no one has produced conclusive evidence that this wild man exists.
But there's one artifact in the museum's archives that could be the smoking gun.
The most important artifact in our collection would probably be a tooth, which we believe to be a Bigfoot tooth.
Where did this tooth come from? And can it actually put an end to the age-old debate of whether or not Bigfoot is real?
2002, Felton, California. An amateur fossil hunter named Matt Bento is digging in an area of geologically unique sandhills that were once the floor of a prehistoric ocean.
These sand hills are literally filled with shark's teeth.
What he finds is a large yellowed tooth resembling a human molar, but much, much bigger.
The man is a veterinary nurse by trade, so it's pretty obvious to anybody who's familiar with animal teeth that it looks like a primate tooth.
Its size suggests the tooth belongs to some kind of large ape. But since apes are not native to Northern California, the discovery is baffling. Then, in 2008, Bento visits the Bigfoot Discovery Museum and shares his find with curator Michael Rugg, who is struck by the tantalizing possibility that this strange tooth could actually belong to the legendary creature.
Looks like a human upper molar, but it's way too big.
So, if it's not human, what other large primate could have lost a tooth in the woods of Northern California?
Some people think that the Bigfoot is actually Gigantopithecus, a living relic, a fossil ape that still exists.
Gigantopithecus is a genus of giant apes believed to have lived between 1 million and 300,000 years ago. Based on teeth and skull fragments found in Asia, scientists have speculated that these orangutan-like apes grew up to 9 feet in height and would have had correspondingly large feet. Is it possible that a small contingent of this species migrated over an ancient land bridge from Asia and somehow survived extinction to roam the woods of North America?
This tooth that we have does not actually match up and resemble Gigantopithecus teeth. It's actually more human-like than the Gigantotooth.
Does this mean that the tooth is indeed the remains of the supposed human-ape hybrid that people have come to refer to as Bigfoot?
We have high hopes that what we have is actually a Sasquatch tooth.
Rugg is working with scientists to extract a viable sample of the tooth's DNA for testing. Until they succeed, the age and origins of this curious cuspid, on display at the Bigfoot Discovery Museum in Felton, California, will remain a mystery, as will the veracity of the creature called Bigfoot.
A terrifying flight through the most mysterious place on Earth.
One of the pilots says, nothing looks familiar. Everything looks strange, even the ocean.
What lies at the heart of the Bermuda Triangle.
December 5th, 1945. Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Base. At 2:10 p.m., a squadron of 5 torpedo bombers, led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor and designated Flight 19, takes off for a training exercise.
The plan for that day was a mock bombing run. Head toward the Bahamas and drop some bombs on a concrete shipwreck. And then they would turn back toward Fort Lauderdale.
Initially, the mission goes according to plan. And shortly after 3 p.m., with their mock bombing run complete, Flight 19 prepares to head back to land. But 45 minutes later, a flight instructor back on base named Lieutenant Robert Cox picks up a troubling transmission from the bombers.
I don't know where we are. We must have gotten lost on that last turn.
Concerned, Cox immediately contacts Lieutenant Taylor, the squadron leader, only to be left reeling by Taylor's response.
Lieutenant Taylor seems to be over land that he thinks is the Florida Keys. This is bizarre because they clearly were heading east. They were supposed to be over the Atlantic Ocean. And now, for some strange reason, he thinks he's in the Florida Keys, which is over 300 miles away. That doesn't add up at all.
To make matters worse, Taylor also reports that his compasses have stopped working.
One of the pilots says that they couldn't find west, that nothing looked familiar. Everything looks strange, even the ocean.
The men back at base can't comprehend how so many experienced pilots could become so disoriented, and they are concerned that the squadron's fuel is running dangerously low when they get one last chilling transmission.
The final transmission says it looks like we're heading into white water, and we're completely lost.
December 5th, 1945. A squadron of 5 U.S. Navy bombers, collectively known as Flight 19, has gone missing while on a training mission off the coast of Florida. The last radio contact with the planes indicated the pilots were lost and running out of fuel somewhere over the churning Atlantic Ocean.
The control tower scrambles 2 rescue aircraft to go in search of the lost pilots. But no one is prepared for what happens next.
The rescue aircraft, with 13 men on board, completely vanishes.
So what happened to the men of Flight 19 and the search aircraft that followed it into oblivion? It so happens that the squadron was not the first or last to vanish over this tract of ocean. Investigators note that an unusually large number of ships and aircraft have gone missing after entering these waters.
This whole area is notorious, going back hundreds of years. It seems to swallow up ships without a trace.
In the years following Flight 19's loss, the name Bermuda Triangle is coined to describe this part of the Atlantic Ocean. So could there be something specific about this region that is causing these strange disappearances? Some speculate that the area's bizarre and tragic history is related to an unusual magnetic field that distorts navigational readings, which could explain the sudden compass failure reported by Lieutenant Taylor of Flight 19. Others think that the legendary triangle may possess otherworldly powers.
Some people think that there's some sort of alien or UFO reason for some of these strange anomalies in what seems to be a very concentrated area.
But the Navy's official investigation fails to provide a definitive answer.
They finally concluded that the disappearance of Flight 19 and the subsequent rescue mission was due to reasons unknown.
We may never know what really happened to the missing airmen, but the disappearance of Flight 19 has forever marked the Bermuda Triangle as a region shrouded in mystery. The true story of America's most chilling murder.
It was very difficult for people to come to terms with the idea that a woman could have murdered in such a fashion.
So was Lizzie Borden guilty? It's the summer of 1892, Fall River, Massachusetts. A self-made businessman named Andrew Borden has made his home here with his wife, Abby.
Abby Durfee Gray Borden was Andrew Borden's second wife. She married into the family in 1865.
Sharing the family home are Andrew Borden's daughters by a previous marriage, Emma and Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie Borden's life, by all accounts, was a fairly easy life, and she appears to have been well provided for.
From the outside, the Borden family seems to enjoy a peaceful, prosperous life together. But it will soon transpire that the outward trappings of gentility are just an illusion. On August 4th, 1892, some believe a long-standing family feud finally came to a chilling climax. Sometime before noon, Lizzie Borden summoned the maid, Bridget Sullivan, with these 4 chilling words. Someone has killed father. When the police arrive, they find Andrew Borden on his living room couch, bludgeoned to death. His wife, Abby, lies dead in the upstairs bedroom, her skull smashed in.
Who is behind this gruesome crime, and what motive drove them to kill? It's 1892 in New England. The town of Fall River, Massachusetts is home to a prominent businessman named Andrew Borden, his second wife, Abby, and his daughters, Emma and Lizzie. But on August 4th, the Borden residence becomes the scene of a heinous crime, when Andrew Borden and his wife are brutally slaughtered. So who committed this grisly double murder?
At the time of the murders, we know that Lizzie Borden was about the house, as was the maid, Bridget Sullivan. Those are the only 2 people that we definitely know were on the premises.
Having no motive, the maid is quickly dismissed as a suspect. But police soon realize Lizzie Borden had 2 powerful incentives to kill: money and property. The previous year, Andrew Borden had purchased another home for his second wife, Abby. But Andrew Borden's 2 daughters, who were from a previous marriage, felt they were denied their inheritance.
From the point of the real estate transaction, it appears that there were some difficulties in that household.
During the interrogation, suspicion mounts.
Lizzie apparently gave very vague answers to questions as to her whereabouts.
When police search the property, they find a clue that they believe will help them finger the killer: a broken axe head.
It appeared to have been freshly cleaned. They did find it fit into the different angles of the wounds on the skull.
So did Lizzie Borden use this hatchet to kill her father and stepmother? After several days of questioning, Lizzie Borden is arrested, and on June 5th, 1893, she is put on trial for murder. The prosecution's case relies heavily on what it claims is the murder weapon. A forensic expert shows how the wounds to the victim's skulls and the hatchet's blade fit together. But the evidence is not enough to convince the jury.
All of the evidence in this case was circumstantial. They had absolutely no proof of Lizzie Borden's guilt.
It's possible that the very brutality of the bloody slayings are what spared Lizzie Borden.
It was very difficult for people to come to terms with the idea that a woman could have murdered in such a fashion.
While we may never know the true culprit, Lizzie Borden's name will be forever linked with a gruesome double murder. A dark tale of money and murder.
There's no weapon, there's no footprints, fingerprints.
Who killed the notorious gangster, Bugsy Siegel?
1937, Los Angeles. A 31-year-old gangster and Brooklyn native named Benjamin Bugsy Siegel has just arrived in town. Hot-tempered and charismatic, Bugsy has been tasked with spearheading the New York mob's western expansion. And with its burgeoning film industry, the sunny metropolis seems like the perfect fit for the mobster.
Bugsy Siegel wanted to be a businessman and a star. He loved hanging out with the celebrities. They loved hanging out with him.
And in February of that year, at an A-list soiree, the gangster's life changes forever when he meets an aspiring actress named Virginia Hill.
She's attractive, and she just sort of oozes this sort of sensuality. And he sees her, she sees him, and sparks fly.
The starlet is no stranger to the criminal underworld. She's known to be a courier of the Chicago Mafia and has been romantically linked with Bugsy's arch nemesis, Joe Adonis.
Joe Adonis is a boss of the mob, a one-time ally of Bugsy Siegel, who's now his enemy.
Despite her past associations, Siegel embarks on a torrid affair. He names his new obsession Flamingo for her long legs. And as the relationship heats up, Siegel's professional ambition begins to grow. He convinces his bosses to bankroll the construction of a high-end hotel and casino. His chosen site? A small, dusty town in the Nevada desert called Las Vegas.
Bugsy Siegel is building what he thinks and wants to be a star attraction. This is where he gets to show he's one classy guy.
In honor of his girl, he names it the Flamingo. With millions of dollars on the line, the ambitious mobster decides to oversee the construction himself. But soon, the massive undertaking spirals out of control.
For a project that his bosses in the East Coast thought was going to run him about $1 million, it wound up being in the $6 million range.
Finally, in March of 1947, after countless delays, the Flamingo opens its doors to the gambling public. But what Siegel envisioned as a premier destination fails to take off. His East Coast mob financiers are livid.
Investors from back east, they're mad. They're not making the profits they should.
Consumed by the fate of the Flamingo, Bugsy's relationship with Virginia begins to suffer. And in June of 1947, after a heated argument, the tumultuous affair reaches a breaking point. Hill books a flight to Paris, leaving Siegel all alone. Then, 4 days later, Bugsy is relaxing after an early dinner, when suddenly the tranquil evening air is pierced by a thunderous roar.
From the bushes just outside, shots are fired. 4 of them hit Siegel.
Investigators are quickly called to the scene and discover the dead, bullet-riddled body of Bugsy Siegel.
Bugsy Siegel sort of crumpled up. It's gruesome. It's ugly.
All signs seem to indicate that he was the victim of a cold-blooded hit. But who has sent Bugsy Siegel to his grave?
June 20th, 1947. Charismatic mob kingpin Benjamin Bugsy Siegel has built a gambling empire in the Las Vegas desert. But along the way, he's ruffled more than a few feathers. So when he's gunned down in California, police have no shortage of suspects, but very little actual evidence. So who killed Bugsy Siegel?
Investigators sweep the scene.
There's no weapon, there's no footprints, fingerprints, tire tracks. There's really a very small amount of evidence.
Among the scarce clues detectives recover are the bullet fragments fired by the murderer's weapon.
With the case making headlines across the country, police are under pressure to find the culprit.
If you think about it, it's kind of hard to think of who at that moment wasn't mad at Bugsy Siegel.
Authorities suspect that Siegel's East Coast bosses had tired of his costly mismanagement of the Flamingo and decided to rub him out.
Las Vegas is potentially their golden goose, and they don't want Bugsy messing it up.
But soon, a very different theory emerges, that the gangster's murder wasn't a matter of business, but of love and revenge. It's believed that Virginia Hill was ordered to spy on Bugsy for the Chicago mob. But as their relationship grew closer than expected, her former paramour, Joe Adonis, began to seethe.
Joe Adonis really resented that Bugsy took Virginia from him.
Some believe that Adonis ordered the execution of his romantic rival, and that Virginia was alerted to the impending hit.
There's a theory that Virginia Hill certainly knew it was coming, and that's why she's away, and may have been paid to be away.
The idea gains credence when police discover that in the wake of the murder, Virginia has rekindled her relationship with Joe Adonis. But when authorities question her, she denies any knowledge of the hit.
Police continue to scour for leads, but over time, the investigation stalls. And to this day, the slaying of Bugsy Siegel remains one of the Los Angeles Police Department's most perplexing unsolved cases. An iconic inventor and an unbelievable twist of fate.
Edison must have flipped out when he saw what happened to his machine.
Just 20 minutes outside the metropolis of New York sits a quintessentially American town, West Orange, New Jersey. And just off its main street is a shrine to a truly American icon, the Thomas Edison National Historical Park. For 44 years, the brilliant inventor worked in this lab, developing revolutionary technologies like the phonograph, storage battery, and motion picture camera. But there is a much lesser-known creation on display that, according to archivist Leonard DeGraff, left its mark in a truly unexpected way. What is this device, and what multi-billion-dollar industry did it spawn? It's 1875, and Thomas Edison is working on a new invention. At the age of 28, he has already patented a stock ticker, a new version of the telegraph, and an electric voting machine. But now the inventor sees an opportunity to fundamentally alter the landscape of business.
Businesses in the 1870s and 1880s are expanding in size, and the scope of their activities is increasing. And that's generating the need to create a lot of paperwork.
Yet the process of creating duplicates is tedious and expensive.
One way is to send your document to a printer and have it printed. Another way is to have a copyist make hand copies of the document.
But Edison has an idea for a radical new machine that creates high-quality copies efficiently and cheaply: the electric pen. The contraption is a handheld device with a battery-powered motor, which drives a needle up and down just like a sewing machine. The user writes with a pen on a sheet of paper, but instead of leaving ink, the pen pokes holes in the paper, creating a stencil.
A ink roller would be passed over it, and the holes would allow the ink to pass through to the other sheet, creating an exact copy of the document. Edison's intent was that it could make many copies from one stencil.
In 1876, Edison patents his creation and reveals it to the world. But once this promising device hits the market, customers are not impressed. While the pen is fast and precise, many find the device difficult to hold, and the battery leaks toxic liquid. But before Edison can make improvements, the marketplace shifts.
By the late 1870s, the electric pen was supplanted by newer, simpler technologies: the typewriter, carbon paper, and then later the mimeograph machine.
Sales of the electric pen plummet, and the device that once promised to dramatically improve business is now little more than a commercial disappointment. Yet Edison's failure is about to gain a surprising second life.
Edison must have flipped out when he saw what happened to his machine.
It's 1878, New Jersey. Thomas Edison has invented a revolutionary device that creates duplicates of office documents. It's called the electric pen. But when it hits the shelves, businesses find it unwieldy, and the inventor's brainchild is a commercial flop. Nevertheless, Edison's electric pen will leave an unexpected and permanent mark.
New York City, the late 1800s. Tens of thousands of new immigrants are making this metropolis their home, and one of them is a businessman named Samuel O'Reilly.
Samuel O'Reilly was an Irish immigrant and came to the United States in 1870.
The Irishman settles into the Bowery, a neighborhood in Manhattan's bustling Lower East Side.
Thomas Edison had some of his wares in a storefront on the Bowery, and O'Reilly would pass by it every day and see the electric pen.
O'Reilly has heard of the pen's speed and ability to form precise, even lines, and inspiration strikes. Instead of poking holes in paper, what if the electric pen could ink lines on human skin?
Samuel O'Reilly was a hand-poke tattoo artist.
Hand-poke tattoo artists use a sharpened piece of wood or metal to meticulously insert pigment into the skin.
He knew immediately the motion going up and down was the same motion of tattooing by hand. And he says, you know, this could work as a tattoo machine.
O'Reilly begins streamlining the pen's design. He modifies the handle, making it easier to grip, and adds an ink needle.
It was a constant speed. Now you could control the tattoo much better. He knew that it would cut down time, increase his revenue, and give him a better product.
And in 1891, he files a patent for a new device he simply calls the tattoo machine, and quickly puts it to use.
It made it possible to speed up a tattoo, to make them look cleaner, to make them last longer, to be more creative, to be more artistic.
Word of his fast and efficient machine gets around, and soon O'Reilly is doing a brisk business of up to 130 tattoos a day. Over the years, O'Reilly trains dozens of apprentices in the art of the electric tattoo. And soon, a fad once confined to soldiers and sailors begins to spread into the greater community.
This was a revolutionary device, it really was. It put O'Reilly on the map, and it put tattooing on the map.
Today, over 20% of American adults sport at least one tattoo, fueling what has become a $1.6 billion industry.
And it's all thanks to a failed invention that found a new purpose in the most unlikely of places.